Okay, they could ask you to sketch a cubic curve such as this, okay, without finding stationary points. So the question is, how would we go about that? Firstly, we'll determine the roots, okay, where it crosses the x-axis. So we work that out. So we say, look, on the x-axis, of course, y is equal to 0, yeah? So we could set that equal to 0, and then we'll have x, and then bracket x minus 2 squared equals 0. So we say, look, either x equals 0, or that bracket squared is equal to 0. So that means simply x minus 2 is 0, isn't it? And then we get x equals 2. So we've got two positions where it is equal 0. So we know whereabouts on the axes the curve is going to cross. Okay, so if I was to draw xy axis, I'd know it crosses at 0 and crosses there at 2. And the question is, what happens then sort of in between and either side of it? Now, what we need to think about to start with is what happens to the curve as x gets really big, okay, as x shoots off to infinity. And if you look at this here, as x gets really big, think about what happens to y. So, you know, just put a number in if you want. Think about when x is 1,000,000, okay, if this was 1,000,000, yeah, well, this then would be, okay, 1,000,000 take away 2, which is kind of close to 1,000,000, isn't it? And when you square it, it's even bigger, isn't it? It's almost like 1,000,000,000,000. This is going to get really, really big. So what happens is, as x goes to infinity, y will also go to infinity. So we know then it's going to just shoot off like that, okay? The curve is just going to just shoot off to infinity. And then what happens then as x goes to minus infinity? So in other words, as x gets really small, so you know, imagine having a minus 1,000,000 here, okay? Think about what happens to this. Minus 1,000,000 minus 2 is still about minus 1,000,000, isn't it? But you're squaring it. So what happens when you square it? Well, of course, squaring minus 1,000,000 becomes positive. So this is positive, but don't forget you've got a negative in front. So you have a negative times a positive, and a big negative times a big positive. Well, it's still going to be negative, isn't it? So as x goes to minus infinity, y will go to minus infinity. So you know now negative is going to shoot off here. The question is then what happens between. Now, what you need to think about here is the maximum is going to occur maybe somewhere in here, but don't worry too much about it. The point is, what I would look at this is realize that in this region here is positive, x is positive. Well, if x is positive, then y has to be positive, doesn't it? Because if x is positive, that's positive. This bracket, squared has got to be positive, because anything squared is positive. So you've got positive times a positive is going to give you positive, isn't it? Okay. Even though they're small values, we know it's going to be positive here. So quite simply, when we sketch it, we know this is going to shoot off to minus infinity. Okay. It's going to go through the origin. Now it's going to keep rising. It's going to be positive, but at some point it's got to come back down because it's got to hit the axis again, isn't it? It's got to be 0 here. But I know it will actually hit the axis and it will turn around straight away. Okay, it'll turn around straight away, and then of course it'll shoot off to positive infinity. I know that's the case there because it cannot be negative. Okay, when x is positive, think about it, when x is positive, that's positive, it cannot be negative, so I know it's going to shoot off then to positive infinity. And there's your graph there, okay, there's your sketch.